Hello there, everyone. Welcome to Whisper Zone. I am your storyteller, and I'm here to guide you tonight. I know many of you use these videos to drift off to sleep, so before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. I'm always curious. Where are you watching from, and what time is it in your part of the world? Now, find your cozy spot and relax. The coffee in the metal camping mug was still warm when I found it. That's what scared me the most. My name is Marcus O'Connor, and after 20 years as a ranger in Olympic National Forest, I thought I'd seen everything. But nothing could have prepared me for what I discovered that foggy morning in October 1962. I was doing my usual patrol when I spotted something strange through the morning mist. A campsite that looked like it had been hit by a tornado. But this was no ordinary storm damage. The tents weren't just collapsed, they were shredded from the inside out, like something had exploded through them. Sleeping bags and backpacks were scattered everywhere, and half-eaten breakfast plates sat on a fold-up table, the eggs and bacon barely touched. But it was the blood that made my stomach turn. It wasn't splattered randomly like you'd see from an animal attack. No, it formed perfect triangles on the ground and trees, like someone, or something, had painted them there on purpose. Hello? Anyone here? I called out, my voice echoing through the trees. Only silence answered back. After 25 years of patching up wounded soldiers in Korea and rescuing lost hikers in these woods, I'd developed pretty thick skin, but something about this scene made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. 3 days earlier, 5 experienced hikers had gone missing in this area. We found their cars at the trailhead, engines still running, doors wide open like they'd seen something that made them run. Their backpacks were still in the vehicles. No experienced hiker would ever go into these woods without their gear. I radioed back to base. "This is O'Connor. I found something at grid point 7. You better send backup." While waiting, I searched the campsite and found a leather journal under one of the sleeping bags. The last entry made my blood run cold. Day 2. Something's following us. Not a bear or wolf. Keep staying just out of sight. Mike says they're just shadows, but shadows don't walk like men. They don't watch you. These do. Getting dark now. The howling is starting again. Doesn't sound like any animal I've ever... The entry stopped mid-sentence. That afternoon, I visited Joseph Running Bear, an elder from the local tribe I'd known for years. When I described what I'd found, his dark eyes filled with worry. "Those who hunt in packs have returned," he said, quietly, his weathered hands gripping his walking stick. "The old ones spoke of them. They come when the moon is full. They steal more than just flesh, Marcus. They steal minds." I'd always respected the tribal legends, but I was a practical man. I dealt in facts, evidence, things I could see and touch. But as I drove back to my cabin that evening, watching the nearly full moon rise over the ancient trees, a chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the October air. Something was out there in my forest. Something that wasn't supposed to exist. And I had a terrible feeling this was just the beginning. As I parked my truck and walked to my cabin door, a long, inhuman howl echoed through the trees. It sounded almost like laughter. I locked my door that night. I'd never done that before. The dream started that very night. I was running through the forest on all fours, faster than any human could move. The ground felt different under my hands. No, not hands anymore. They were something else. My nose picked up scents I'd never smelled before, damp earth, frightened animals, and something else. Something that made my mouth water. I woke up gasping, my sheets soaked with sweat. The bedroom window was wide open, even though I distinctly remembered closing it before bed. When I got up to shut it, I noticed something that made my heart stop. My boots by the door were caked with fresh mud. "Pull yourself together, Marcus," I whispered to myself. "You're just stressed about those missing hikers." But then I saw the marks on my cabin door. 3 long scratches that hadn't been there the night before, carved deep into the wood. They were too big to be from a bear. Over the next few days, things got stranger. I'd find dead rabbits and deer in the forest, but they weren't killed like normal predator attacks. They were arranged in perfect circles, like some kind of ritual. The worst part was their eyes. All of them were open, staring in the same direction. The howls kept coming every night, but they weren't normal wolf howls. Sometimes they sounded almost like words, like someone trying to talk but forgetting how. My radio started picking up weird sounds too, whispers mixed in with the static. Once, I could have sworn I heard my own voice calling for help. I knew. I had to investigate deeper. Following an old trail map Joseph had given me, I found a cave system that wasn't on any official forest records. The entrance was hidden behind thick vines, and my flashlight beam showed ancient paintings on the walls. The pictures told a story. Tribal hunters running from tall, wolf-like creatures that walked on two legs. But these weren't just monster stories. There were warnings. The paintings showed the creatures touching people's heads with their claws, and then those people turning against their own families. One word kept appearing in the tribal language. Joseph had taught me enough to understand it. Mind stealers. The cave walls showed more. How these creatures hunted by the moon cycles, always in packs, always led by something bigger than the rest. The tribal people called it the Alpha Beast, the one that controlled all the others. As I studied the paintings, my flashlight started flickering. Then I heard it, the scrape of claws on stone coming from deeper in the cave. My light caught a glimpse of something moving in the darkness ahead, something big. I backed away slowly, trying to keep my breathing quiet, but in my head, clear as day, I heard a voice that wasn't mine. "Welcome, Hunter. We've been waiting for you." I ran all the way back to my cabin, but running doesn't help when what's chasing you can get inside your mind. That night, I called the ranger station and requested backup. 4 of my best rangers were coming tomorrow. I didn't tell them everything, how could I? But as I watched the moon growing fuller through my window, I knew we were running out of time. Something horrible was waking up in my forest, and somehow it already knew my name. The next morning my backup arrived, Jim, Mike, Sarah, and Dave. Rangers I'd worked with for years. Good people, experienced people. I wish I'd never called them. So what exactly are we dealing with here? "Marcus?" Jim asked as we geared up. I told them about the destroyed campsite, the missing hikers, and the strange animal signs. I left out the voice in my head and the dreams. They already looked worried enough. But something was wrong from the start. Within an hour of beginning our search, everyone started acting strange. Sarah kept stopping to look over her shoulder at things none of us could see. Mike wouldn't stop scratching his arms, saying he felt like something was crawling under his skin. Then the whispers started. At first we all heard them differently. "Did someone just call my name?" Dave would ask. "I thought I heard my daughter crying," Sarah said, even though her daughter was safe at home. "Everyone needs to shut up," Jim shouted. But we weren't talking. The worst part? We started seeing the same things. Dark shapes moving between the trees. Eyes reflecting our flashlight beams that were too high up to be any normal animal. And the feeling, that horrible feeling that something was watching us. Not just with its eyes, but somehow looking right into our minds. It happened so fast with Dave. One minute he was walking beside me. The next he was screaming, clawing at his head. "They're in there," he kept yelling. "They're in my head. Make it stop." Before any of us could grab him, he pulled out his gun, and I still hear that shot in my nightmares. The fog rolled in thick after that, but this wasn't natural fog. It moved against the wind, like it had a mind of its own. That's when we saw them for the first time. They came out of the mist like living shadows, 7 feet tall at least, walking, on 2 legs but definitely not human. Their faces were like wolves but wrong somehow, too smart, too aware. Their eyes glowed yellow in the fog, and when they looked at you, you could feel them digging through your thoughts like they were flipping through a book. "Run!" I screamed, but it was too late. The pack had surrounded us. Jim and Mike took off in one direction, Sarah in another. I heard their screams, one after another. The sounds they made. No human should be able to scream like that. I ran until my lungs were burning. When I finally stopped, I was alone in a clearing. Or I thought I was alone until I saw it, the Alpha Beast. Bigger than the others, its black fur streaked with gray. It stood in front of me, and for a moment, I saw what they really were. Not just animals, not just monsters, but something ancient. Something that had been here long before us. It reached out one clawed hand, and in my head, I heard that voice again. Your mind is strong, Hunter. You've resisted us longer than the others, but now it's time to join the pack. I watched in horror as its form seemed to shift and blur. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was feeling my own body starting to change too. The full moon broke through the clouds above us, and the real horror was about to begin. Just as the alpha beast reached for me, my hand touched something in my jacket pocket. The small medicine bag Joseph had given me years ago. For protection, he'd said. I'd always kept it as a good luck charm, never thinking I'd need it. The moment I grabbed it, the creature jerked back like it had been burned. The voice in my head turned to static, and for the first time since this nightmare began, my thoughts were completely my own. That's when I remembered Joseph's words. The old ones knew how to fight them. I ran toward the one place I knew I had to go, the tribal burial ground near the river. Joseph had shown it to me once, telling me it was sacred ground. Now I understood why. The pack followed me, but they stayed back, snarling in frustration. The medicine bag was holding them off, but I could feel it wouldn't last long. Their minds kept pushing against mine, like waves trying to break through a dam. In the burial ground, stone markers covered in ancient symbols formed a circle. As I crossed the small stream to reach it, I noticed something strange. The creatures wouldn't cross the running water. They paced on the other bank, their yellow eyes glowing with hatred. I remembered the cave paintings. They showed the tribal warriors using sacred herbs, the same kinds that were growing right here among the graves. I grabbed handfuls of them, and when the alpha beast finally leaped across the stream, I threw them in its face. The creature's scream was like nothing I'd ever heard. Part wolf, part human, and part something else entirely. It clawed at its own face, stumbling backward. Two others rushed at me from different directions. I dove between them, making them crash into each other. The herbs worked like pepper spray on them, but the alpha beast wasn't done. It charged again, faster than before. Its claws caught my shoulder, ripping deep. The pain was terrible, but worse was the feeling of its mind forcing its way into mine. Not just reading my thoughts now, changing them. With my last bit of strength, I pulled out my lighter. The dry herbs at my feet caught fire instantly. The flames spread in a circle, following the line of sacred stones. The pack howled in pain and fury as the fire surrounded us. Through the flames, I saw 3 of them fall, but the alpha beast had its claws in my head now, and I could feel myself changing. My bones cracked and shifted. Fur sprouted from my skin. My mind was becoming something else, something wild and hungry. The last thing I remember clearly was the sight of rescue helicopters approaching as dawn broke. They found me unconscious, but alive. The official report said I was the only survivor of a tragic accident that killed my whole team. They locked me up in Western State Hospital, saying I had a mental breakdown. Maybe I did. But every full moon I feel the changes start again, and in my head I still hear the voices of the pack, calling me to hunt. I write this from my hospital room, where the walls are padded and the windows have steel bars. Not to keep others out, but to keep me in. Because what's inside me now can never be allowed to roam free. Tonight is another full moon. I can feel them coming for me again. Their voices are getting louder. And the worst part? Sometimes I want to answer back. 1 year later, the nurse who brings my dinner always wears a silver cross. She thinks I don't notice how she hurries out before sunset, especially during full moons. Smart girl. My room in Western State Hospital isn't so bad. The padding on the walls is thick, and the window, though barred, gives me a clear view of the Olympic forest in the distance. Sometimes, on clear days, I can see the exact spot where my old ranger cabin used to be. Joseph visits me once a month. He's the only one who knows the truth. He brings me more medicine bags, stronger ones now, and ties them to my bed frame. The doctors think they're just harmless leather pouches, They don't know these little bags are the only things keeping me partly human. Last week, a new patient arrived. Young guy, maybe 25, said he'd been hiking in the Olympic forest when he found a cave with strange paintings. Said he heard voices in his head after that. I asked him if the voices got stronger during the full moon. The look in his eyes told me everything. The pack is growing. They're hunting again. And even through the hospital walls and medicine bags, I can hear them calling new members. Sometimes, in my clearer moments, I write letters warning the Forest Service. I tell them to close certain trails during full moons, to look for the signs. The circular arrangements of dead animals, the triangular blood patterns, the claw marks that are too high up on trees. They probably throw my letters away. After all, I'm just a crazy old ranger who lost his mind in the woods. But if you're reading this and you're planning a hike in the Olympic forest, remember a few things. Don't go during the full moon. If you hear what sounds like human laughter, in the woods at night, run. If you start having dreams of running on all fours, get out immediately. And if you ever hear voices in your head that aren't your own, well, there's always room for one more here at Western State. Just don't expect to ever leave, because the pack, they're patient, they can wait, and they never ever let go of one of their own. I've seen things in Glacier National Park that still haunt my dreams, things that shouldn't be possible. But before I tell you what happened that terrible summer, you should know that I'm not some rookie who spooks easily. I'm Victoria Reeves, and I've spent 15 years as a park ranger here, with another 10 years in mountain rescue before that. I've dealt with grizzly bears, saved lost hikers in blizzards, and handled every kind of emergency you can imagine. But nothing could have prepared me for what I found on that mountain. It started with the trees. Beautiful pine trees that had been alive for hundreds of years, suddenly frozen solid in the middle of an 80-degree summer day. I discovered the first one during my morning patrol. The trunk was covered in a thick layer of ice, its needles transformed into delicate, crystal chimes that tinkled in the warm breeze. The really strange part? Everything around it was completely normal. Green grass, blooming wildflowers, even a couple of butterflies floating past. It made no sense. I took photos and called it in, thinking maybe it was some weird natural phenomenon. But deep down, I knew something was wrong, really wrong. Over the next few weeks, things got worse. We found more frozen trees and then animals, deer, elk, even a mountain lion, all perfectly preserved in ice. They looked like they'd been flash frozen, caught mid-motion like some twisted nature museum display. The ice around them wouldn't melt even in direct sunlight. But the strangest things were the crystal formations. They started small, just little spikes of ice growing up from the ground here and there. But they spread, forming patterns I'd never seen before. Sometimes when I was alone on patrol, I could swear I heard them growing, making soft cracking sounds like someone walking on a frozen lake. Then the missing persons reports started coming. The first was a backpacker named Mike Chen. Experienced hiker, good equipment, everything done by the book. He was supposed to check in at the ranger station after completing the Highland Trail loop. He never showed. We found his campsite near Ridge Point, everything still set up like he just stepped away for a minute. His coffee was still in the cup, frozen solid. The temperature that day? 85 degrees. Over the next month, we lost 4 more people. Sarah Jenkins, a wildlife photographer. The Anderson family, mom, dad, teenage son, all vanished on a day hike. Each time we found the same things: abandoned gear, strange frost patterns, and that terrible, unnatural cold. I knew we needed help understanding what was happening, so I reached out to Thomas Blackfeather, an elder from the local Blackfeet tribe. I'd worked with him before on search and rescue operations, but when I mentioned Ridge Point, his whole demeanor changed. "That place is forbidden," he told me, his voice dead serious. "Our people have known for generations. There's a winter spirit there, one that never dies, only sleeps. It feeds on more than flesh. It feeds on the warmth of life itself." I asked him to explain more, but he just shook his head. "There are treaties older than this country," he said. agreements made by our ancestors to never set foot on certain peaks. They knew what lived there, what still lives there, the hunger that spreads through consumption. I've never been one for supernatural explanations, but something about the way he spoke sent chills down my spine. Maybe if I'd listened more carefully to his warnings, things would have turned out differently. Maybe I could have saved my team from what happened next, but I didn't listen. Instead, I organized an investigation team to find the source of these strange occurrences. Looking back now, I realize that's when everything really started to go wrong. That's when we woke it up, and God help us, it was hungry. My investigation team consisted of 5 people I trusted with my life. Mike Torres, our best tracker, Dr. Sarah Chen, our wildlife expert, twins Jack and Emma Roberts, both experienced climbers, and Dave Miller, who knew these mountains better than anyone. We packed enough supplies for 5 days, though I hoped we wouldn't need that long to find answers. The hike up to Ridge Point started normally enough. The summer sun was warm on our backs. Birds were singing, and if it weren't for the equipment we were carrying, it might have felt like any other day in the park. But as we got higher, things changed. The birds went quiet. The air got colder, even though it was mid-afternoon. "Look at this," Sarah called out, pointing to the ground. Frost was spreading across the rocks in strange patterns, like someone had drawn delicate snowflakes with a frozen pencil. As we watched, the patterns grew larger, crackling softly. We found the cave entrance just before sunset. It was partially hidden behind some rocks, and cold air poured out of it like someone had left a freezer door open. Dave shined his flashlight inside, and the beam reflected off walls of ancient ice. "I've been all over these mountains," he whispered, "but I've never seen this place before." We set up camp nearby, though none of us wanted to sleep too close to the cave. That night, the temperature dropped so low our water bottles froze solid. We could hear weird sounds echoing from the cave, like wind, but different. Sometimes it sounded almost like voices. The next morning we went in. The cave tunnel went deep into the mountain, and the walls were covered in that strange, unmelting ice. Our footsteps echoed, and our breath came out in thick white clouds. The deeper we went, the colder it got. Then we found them, bodies, really old ones, preserved in the ice like they'd been frozen yesterday. They wore clothes from the 1800s, old jackets and boots that looked like something from a history book. But that wasn't the scary part. The scary part was the way they were positioned, like they'd been eating each other when they froze. "These marks," Sarah said, pointing to cuts on the bones. "They're not from animals." Her hands were shaking as she took photos. That's when we heard it, a sound like cracking ice, but much louder. The temperature suddenly dropped so low it hurt to breathe. Our flashlight beams started to dim, and frost began creeping up the walls toward us. "We need to get out," I said. "Now." We turned to leave, but Emma stopped suddenly, staring down another tunnel. "Did you guys hear that? It sounded like my mom calling." "Your mom's been gone for 3 years, Em," Jack said quietly, grabbing her arm. But I heard it too. Voices calling from deeper in the cave. They sounded like people I knew, people I'd lost. The sound pulled at something deep inside me, making me want to follow it. That's when we saw it. It was huge, maybe 8 or 9 feet tall. At first I thought it was made of ice because its skin was almost see-through. But ice doesn't move like that. Ice doesn't have antlers made of frost, or eyes that glow with a pale blue light. Ice doesn't reach for you with long fingers that leave trails of frozen air behind them. We ran. God, how we ran. But it followed us, moving in a way nothing that big should be able to move. Wherever it stepped, the ground froze solid. It could make the air so cold it felt like breathing in razor blades. We almost made it to the cave entrance when it did something impossible. Its body just shattered, breaking into hundreds of ice shards that flew through the air. Then the pieces came back together, and suddenly it was right in front of us. Mike was closest. Before any of us could move, the thing reached out and touched his shoulder. Just a quick touch. But I watched frost spread across his jacket, then across his skin. He screamed, but the sound cut off as a thin layer of ice covered his face. Dave managed to throw a flare at it, The only thing we had that might help. The creature recoiled from the heat and light, giving us just enough time to grab Mike and run from the cave. We got him back to camp and wrapped him in emergency blankets. Eventually, the ice melted and he could move again. But something was wrong. His skin felt cold to the touch, and he couldn't get warm no matter what we did. That night, huddled around our campfire, none of us said much. We all knew we should leave, get as far from this mountain as we could. But we also knew it was too late. We'd seen it now, and somehow I knew it had seen us too. And Mike couldn't stop shivering, or staring at the cave, or asking when dinner would be ready, even though he'd just eaten an hour ago. That's when I realized this was just the beginning. Whatever that thing in the cave was, whatever curse or spirit the Blackfeet had warned about, it wasn't just going to let us walk away, and the hunger in Mike's eyes when he looked at us wasn't human anymore. That night, none of us slept much. The temperature kept dropping and Mike's condition got worse. He sat away from the fire, saying it was too hot, even though his lips had turned blue. When Sarah tried to check his temperature, the thermometer wouldn't even give a reading. It just showed an error message. Around midnight, I heard strange noises coming from his tent. It sounded like chewing. I grabbed my flashlight and looked inside. Mike was hunched over his backpack, tearing through all his food. Empty wrappers lay all around him. When he turned to look at me, I almost screamed. His skin had become almost clear, like thin ice, and I could see dark veins running underneath. His eyes weren't brown anymore. They were pale blue, almost white. "I'm so hungry, Victoria," he whispered, but his voice didn't sound like his anymore. It reminded me of wind howling through ice caves. Nothing helps. Nothing fills it. I backed away slowly and woke up the others. We needed to restrain him before things got worse, but it was already too late. When we approached his tent again, he burst out with impossible speed. The ground frosted over wherever he stepped. "We have to help him," Emma cried, trying to run after him. But Jack held her back. "That's not Mike anymore," he said quietly. We spent the rest of the night huddled together, weapons ready, jumping at every sound. By morning, we discovered something terrifying. Mike wasn't the only one changing. Dave showed me his hands. His fingertips had turned slightly transparent, and frost formed whenever he touched anything. "I can't feel them anymore," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "And I'm so hungry." Sarah was showing signs too. She couldn't get warm, and her breath came out like smoke even when she was right next to the fire. The twins seemed okay. But for how long? I knew we had to do something fast. I remembered what Thomas Blackfeather had said about the winter spirit and ancient treaties. Maybe the Blackfeet people knew how to fight this thing. I used our satellite phone to call for help, and Thomas agreed to come to the base of Ridge Point. He still wouldn't come up to where we were. When I described what was happening to my team, he was quiet for a long time. "There are ways to fight it," he finally said. "The old stories speak of sacred fires and special herbs that can drive the cold from a person's body. But it has to be done before the change is complete. Once someone fully turns, there's no bringing them back." He told me where to find some of these herbs growing on the mountain and how to make a special tea with them. He also explained about ancient symbols we could draw around our camp, marks that had protected his people from the winter spirit for generations. But as I was writing, "Everything down," I heard Emma scream. I ran back to camp to find Dave pinning Jack to the ground. Dave's skin had gone completely clear now, like he was made of ice, and his teeth had grown long and sharp. He was trying to bite Jack's throat. Sarah and I managed to pull Dave off, but the touch of his skin gave us frostbite instantly. We used climbing ropes to tie him to a tree, but we could see the ropes already starting to freeze and crack. "Please," Dave begged in a voice that crackled like breaking ice. "I'm so hungry. Just let me have a little bite, just a taste. You don't understand how much it hurts." Jack was shaking, holding his neck where Dave's frozen breath had left a patch of frost. Emma hugged him tight, but I noticed she was shivering too, and not just from fear. I made the tea Thomas had told me about using the herbs I found. It smelled terrible. like burning pine needles and something metallic. Sarah drank some, and so did the twins. I drew the protective symbols around our camp with a mixture of ash and sacred herbs. For a while it seemed to help. Sarah's skin started to look more normal, and she said the hunger was less intense. But Dave was too far gone. He kept getting colder, and the rope holding him was almost completely frozen. That's when we heard it, that awful cracking sound from the cave. The winter spirit was coming, and in the distance we heard another sound. Mike's laugh, but different now, echoing off the mountains like breaking icicles. They were coming for us, and 3 of my team were infected. I had to make an impossible choice, try to save them or stop this thing from spreading further down the mountain to where more people lived. I gripped the flare gun in my pocket, knowing fire was the only thing the creatures seemed to fear. But would it be enough? And could I really use it against Dave? Against Mike? People I'd worked with for years? The sun was setting, and the temperature was dropping fast. Too fast. Frost patterns started spreading across the ground around our camp. They were here. They came at us from all sides. Dave broke free from his frozen ropes first, his body now completely transformed. His fingers had grown into long, icy claws, and his mouth was filled with teeth like icicles. Mike emerged from the darkness next, looking even worse. He'd grown taller, and frost-covered antlers sprouted from his head. Sarah grabbed my arm. "Victoria," she whispered, her voice shaking. I can't fight it anymore. The hunger, it's too strong." I could see her skin starting to turn transparent, her eyes growing pale. The twins were the only ones still fully human besides me. "What do we do?" Emma asked, holding her brother's hand tight. I remembered everything Thomas had told me. The sacred fire, the symbols, the old stories about how his people had fought this spirit before. We had a chance, but it would cost us. "Jack, Emma, get the emergency fuel from all our stoves. Every flare we have. Anything that burns." They nodded and ran to gather supplies while I kept my eyes on our transformed friends. "Please," Dave's icy voice crackled. "We just want to share this gift. No more being weak, no more being warm. Join." So that's when the original creature appeared, the Wendigo from the cave. It towered over all of us, its body like a giant made of living ice. The air around it was so cold it hurt to breathe. Sarah screamed and fell to her knees. I could see the transformation taking her, her skin crystallizing, her fingers stretching into claws. "Run," she managed to say through chattering teeth. "Run!" But I couldn't run, not this time. This thing had taken my friends, and it would keep taking more people if we didn't stop it. The twins returned with the fuel and flares. Working fast, we made a circle of fuel around our camp, just outside the symbols I'd drawn earlier. The Wendigo and our transformed friends watched us, moving closer step by frozen step. "When I say now," I told the twins, "light it all, then run down the mountain as fast as you can. Don't stop for anything." "What about you?" Jack asked. "I'll be right behind you." That was a lie, and I think they knew it. But they nodded anyway. The Wendigo raised its arms, and a fierce blizzard began swirling around us, even though it was summer. The cold was so intense it felt like my skin was burning. Mike and Dave moved closer, their movements jerky and inhuman. Sarah was almost fully transformed now, frost spreading from her body across the ground. "Now!" I screamed. The twins lit the fuel circle. Flames roared up, forming a barrier of fire around us. The Wendigo shrieked, a sound like a glacier cracking apart. Mike and Dave stumbled back from the flames, but Sarah was caught in the circle. With me, I pulled out the last thing Thomas had given me, a small pouch of herbs and sacred objects that his people had used for generations. I threw it into the fire, and the flames turned bright blue. The Wendigo howled and tried to break through the fire. I grabbed a burning branch and faced it. The creature's ice-white eyes locked with mine, and suddenly I understood everything. Its endless hunger, its loneliness, its desire to make others like itself. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for it. Then I remembered what it had done to my friends. The thing that used to be Sarah lunged at me, her icy claws slashing my leg. I fell, and the burning branch flew from my hand. The cold was overwhelming. Now I could feel ice forming in my lungs with every breath. But I had one last trick. I'd strapped all our remaining flares to my body. With shaking hands, I lit them all at once. The heat and light were blinding. The Wendigo screamed and staggered back. Sarah fell away from me, her ice-clear body cracking. Through the flames and snow, I saw the twins running down the mountain trail. I struggled to stand, but couldn't feel my legs anymore. The Wendigo was breaking apart, its ice body shattering in the heat of the sacred fire. Mike and Dave were screaming too, their transformed bodies melting and cracking. The last thing I remember was the feel of my skin freezing as I fell, the sound of ice breaking, the world turning white. I woke up 3 days later in a hospital. The doctors said it was a miracle I survived, though they had to amputate both my legs below the knee due to the severe frostbite. The official report said my team was lost in an unexplained weather phenomenon, a freak blizzard in the middle of summer. They found no trace of Mike, Dave, or Sarah. The cave entrance had collapsed, sealed by tons of rock and ice. The twins made it down the mountain and told their story, but no one believed them. How could they? It was too impossible. Thomas Blackfeather visited me in the hospital. He didn't ask what happened up there. He just nodded and said his people would renew the old treaties, strengthen the ancient warnings. Sometimes at night, when the wind blows cold, I hear sounds that remind me of their voices. And sometimes in my dreams, I still feel that hunger, that terrible endless hunger for warmth. But the Wendigo hasn't been seen again. The frozen spots in the park have thawed. The missing persons reports have stopped. Still, I know the truth. And every winter I wonder, is it really gone? Or is it just sleeping, waiting for someone else to wake it up? Because the hardest part isn't the loss of my legs, or the nightmares, or even the memories of what happened to my friends. The hardest part is knowing that somewhere, deep in those mountains, the ice is always there, waiting, hungry. I've been a park ranger at Redwood National Park for 15 years, and I've never seen anything like this before. My name is James Harrison, and what I'm about to tell you, well, I'm still not sure anyone will believe me, but it needs to be told. It started 3 months ago, on a cold October morning. I was doing my usual patrol through the Western Trail when I noticed something odd about the Miller's Creek path. The massive redwood that had always marked the trailhead. The one I'd passed every single day for years wasn't where it should be. At first I thought lack of coffee was making me confused. But no, that tree, that specific tree with the lightning scar running down its trunk, had moved at least 20 feet to the left. That's impossible, I muttered to myself, pulling out my trail map. Trees don't move. They can't move. But as I stood there staring at my map like an idiot, a chill ran down my spine. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and for a second, I could have sworn I heard something that sounded like breathing. Deep, slow breathing coming from the forest itself. I tried to shake it off. 25 years of wilderness experience, including my time as a guide, had taught me that most strange things had perfectly normal explanations. But over the next few weeks, more oddities kept piling up. The changes in the forest were subtle. At first, new plants would appear overnight in places I knew had been bare the day before. Not just small sprouts, full-grown ferns and bushes, as if they'd been there for years. The moss patterns on the trees started forming weird shapes, almost like symbols. I'd take pictures of them only to come back the next day and find completely different patterns. Then the missing persons report started coming in. Sarah Chen, an experienced rock climber, vanished from a popular climbing route. Her gear was still anchored to the rock face, the ropes intact. It was as if she'd simply let go and disappeared. But that made no sense. We would have found her body below. A week later, the Martinez family failed to return from their camping trip. When my team reached their campsite, everything was exactly in place. Tent properly set up, food stored in bear-proof containers, sleeping bags neatly laid out. No signs of animal attack, no struggle. They'd just vanished. But what really got to me were the dogs. Every search and rescue dog we brought in would get to certain parts of the forest and just stop. These were highly trained animals, but they'd plant their feet, tuck their tails, and refuse to move forward. Some would whimper, others would growl at nothing we could see. In all my years working with SAR dogs, I'd never seen anything like it. Then came the footprints. I found the first one near Fern Canyon, and my blood ran cold. 20 inches long, deeply pressed into the mud with 5 distinct toes. Too big for a bear, wrong shape for anything else I knew. The stride length between prints was massive, suggesting whatever made them had to be, well, I didn't want to think about how big it had to be. But it wasn't just the size that bothered me. It was the way the prints seemed to appear and disappear randomly, as if whatever made them could step in and out of existence at will. And around each print, the vegetation was different, darker, twisted, moving in ways plants shouldn't move. Started finding strange clumps of hair caught in tree bark. Not bear fur, not mountain lion, nothing I could identify. And the territorial markers, those were the worst. Complicated arrangements of broken branches and woven vines that would appear overnight, some 20 feet off the ground. No animal, I knew, could make those, and no human would go through that much trouble, especially not in the dark. The forest was changing, and not in a natural way. The trees seemed to close in whenever I walked alone on the trails. Branches would snap behind me when there was no wind. Sometimes when I was doing my evening patrol, I could swear I saw shadows moving between the trees. Huge shadows that shouldn't exist. I've spent my whole life in these woods. I know every trail, every tree, every rock. But now, for the first time, I'm starting to think I don't know this forest at all. And whatever's out there, it knows we're here. The really scary part? I think it's been here all along, watching, waiting. And now, for some reason, it's done hiding. I probably sound crazy. Maybe I am. But something is very wrong in these woods, and I have a terrible feeling that these disappearances are just the beginning. Whatever's out there, whatever's changing, my forest, it's getting bolder. And I have a feeling it's going to show itself soon. I found the first body on a Tuesday morning. The memory still makes my hands shake when I write about it. I was following up on another missing hiker report when I spotted something strange about one of the old redwoods. There was something dark stuck to its trunk about 8 feet up. At first, I thought it was just a weird growth on the tree, but as I got closer, my flashlight beam revealed something that made my stomach turn. It was a hand, a human hand, growing right out of the tree trunk. I radioed for backup immediately, my voice cracking as I gave the coordinates. When my fellow rangers arrived with the police, we found more. The tree hadn't just caught the body, it had grown through it. Small branches and roots had woven themselves through clothes and, well, I won't describe the rest. I've seen bear attacks and climbing accidents, but this was different. This was impossible. The worst part? We recognized the victim. It was Sarah Chen, the climber who'd gone missing, but she wasn't alone. In the trees around her, we found 3 more bodies. The entire Martinez family, each one wrapped up in wood and leaves, like the forest had tried to make them part of itself. That's when the research team showed up. Dr. Emily Wong and her group from the university said they'd been tracking unusual plant growth patterns along the coast. They had all sorts of fancy equipment, sensors, cameras, soil testing kits. Under normal circumstances, I would have been happy to help scientists study the forest. But these weren't normal circumstances. This is fascinating, Dr. Wong said, examining a root system that seemed to pulse like it had a heartbeat. The plants are exhibiting coordinated behavior, almost like they're connected to a central intelligence. I wanted to tell them to leave. My gut was screaming that we were all in danger. But before I could open my mouth, everything changed. It happened fast. 1 minute, Dr. Wong was crouched by the root. The next minute, a vine as thick as my arm shot out of the ground and wrapped around her leg. I ran forward with my knife, but then I saw it. We all saw it. Standing between 2 ancient redwoods was something huge. At least 9 feet tall, covered in dark fur. But not like any bear or animal I'd ever seen. Its eyes. They glowed with a deep green light, and all around it the plants were moving. Moving like they were alive. Moving like they were its fingers and arms. The thing, the Sasquatch, raised one massive hand and the trees responded. Branches bent and swayed without any wind. Roots burst from the ground like snakes. The entire forest was dancing to its command. We ran. What else could we do? But the forest itself fought against us. Vines grabbed at our ankles. Branches swung down to block our path. Trees that I swear weren't there seconds ago stood in our way. 4 of us made it back to the ranger station. Dr. Wong and 2 of her assistants weren't so lucky. We could hear their screams getting more distant, mixed with the sound of cracking wood and rustling leaves. We barricaded ourselves inside, but it didn't feel safe. How could it, when the entire forest was our enemy? The plants outside the station started growing visibly, pressing against the windows. Through the glass, we could see more dark shapes moving between the trees. Not just one Sasquatch now. Many. Dr. Chen, one of the surviving researchers, was frantically going through her data on her laptop. "This is incredible," she whispered, though she looked terrified. "The entire forest, it's connected, like one giant organism. And those creatures, they're not just controlling it, they're part of it. They're using the root systems like some kind of natural internet." "But why now?" I asked. "Why are they attacking people now? I've worked here for 15 years, and nothing like this ever happened before." That's when we heard the trees whisper. Yes, whisper. A sound like voices in the wind, but with words we could almost understand. And they were getting closer. We, huddled in that station all night, listening to the forest move around us. None of us slept. How could we? Every creak, every rustle could have been them coming for us. As the sun rose the next morning, we found a message carved into the wooden door of the station. Not carved, grown. The wood had twisted itself into words. "Leave. This is our home." I've seen a lot of strange things in my years as a ranger, but nothing could have prepared me for this. The forest I thought I knew so well had become something else, something angry, and we were not welcome here anymore. Morning brought no relief. As the sun rose over the ranger station, we saw what the forest had become overnight. The trees had grown so close together that they blocked most the sunlight. Thick vines covered the building like a web, and in the shadows between the trunks we could see them moving. "There's at least 7 of them," I whispered, counting the massive shapes through the window. They moved like people, but much bigger and stronger. The smallest one was probably 8 feet tall. The biggest, well, I didn't want to think about that. The Sasquatch weren't just wandering around. They were organizing. The largest one, with silver-streaked fur, seemed to be the leader. It would make deep, rumbling sounds, and the others would respond. They used the trees like most people use doors, stepping into one trunk and emerging from another farther away. Dr. Chen was still taking notes, even though her hands were shaking. "Look at how they communicate with the plants," she said. "They touch the trees and it's like sending a message through the roots. The whole forest is their telephone system." She was right. Every time one of them touched a tree, we could see a ripple of movement spread through the forest. Branches would bend, flowers would turn, and vines would twist in patterns that almost looked like sign language. We tried calling for help on the radio, but all we got was static and a strange whisper that sounded like rustling leaves. Our phones showed no signal. The forest was cutting us off from the outside world. That's when they started their attack. It began with the flowers. Beautiful purple blooms appeared everywhere, even pushing through cracks in the station's walls. They released a sweet-smelling pollen that made us dizzy. Roberts, one of my fellow rangers, breathed in too much and started seeing things that weren't there. He ran outside before we could stop him. We never saw him again. Next came the trees. They didn't just move, they hunted. Their branches would snap down like giant arms, trying to grab anyone who got too close. We watched in horror as a rescue helicopter tried to land in the clearing. The trees around it simply grew taller in seconds. tangling in the rotors. The pilot barely managed to pull away in time. The vines were the worst. They could squeeze through any gap, no matter how small. They were strong too, strong enough to pull a grown man off his feet. We had to keep cutting them back from the doors and windows. Every time we cut one, two more would grow in its place. But it was what we found in the old grove that really showed us what we were dealing with. When the vines forced us to abandon the station, we ran deeper into the forest, hoping to find another way out. Instead, we found their home. The ancient grove was like stepping into another world. The trees here were older than anything I'd ever seen, arranged in a perfect circle. Their trunks were covered in carvings, not made with tools but grown into the wood itself. They told a story. Dr. Chen translated what she could. These markings, they're old, really old. Look at this one. It shows the Sasquatch teaching early humans about the forest. And here, it shows them protecting the trees from something. Fire, maybe? Or, she paused, her face going pale. Or development. Look at these newer marks. They show buildings, roads. That's when it hit me. The new logging project, the planned resort development. The forest expansion that the Park Service had been fighting against. All of it was going to cut into this area, their territory. They're not attacking us, I said slowly. They're defending their home. We're the invaders here. A deep sound rumbled through the grove, like thunder, but closer. The silver-furred leader stepped out of a nearby tree. Up close, it was even more impressive. Those green eyes held intelligence and anger, but also something else. Sadness. Maybe? It reached out and touched one of the carved trees. Suddenly, images filled my head. I saw the forest as it had been thousands of years ago. I saw the Sasquatch living peacefully, protecting the woods, helping lost travelers, teaching humans about nature. Then I saw what we'd done. The cutting, the building, the destroying. Year after year, their home got smaller. And now we were about to take the last of it. The message was clear. This was their last stand. They weren't going to lose any more of their home. As the images faded, I heard screaming. The rest of the rescue team had arrived at the edge of the forest with bulldozers and equipment. They were trying to cut their way in to save us. The leader's eyes flashed. Around us, the entire forest seemed to take a deep breath. The real fight was about to begin. I stood in that ancient grove, listening to the sound of chainsaws getting closer. The rescue team thought they were coming to save us, but they were walking right into a war with the forest itself. The silver-furred Sasquatch leader looked at me, those green eyes glowing brighter than ever. Through the root system, it showed me one last vision, a future where the bulldozers won, where this sacred grove became a parking lot, where its people had nowhere left to go. The pain in that vision felt like a physical thing, heavy and cold. My chest. Wait, I said both to the Sasquatch and to myself. There might be another way. Dr. Chen looked at me like I was crazy. What are you talking about, Harrison? We need to get out of here. But I couldn't stop thinking about the filing cabinet in my office. The one with the paperwork that could change everything. You see, 3 months ago, I'd been put in charge of reviewing the final permits for the development project. I was supposed to sign off on them last week. I hadn't done it yet. Without those permits, the whole project would be stopped. The forest would be protected. But the paperwork was back in my office at the ranger station, now deep in Sasquatch territory. I had to make a choice. Try to escape with the others or go back for those papers. Save myself or save the forest. 25 years of being a wilderness guide. 15 years as a ranger. All that time I thought I was protecting the forest. But maybe the forest had been protecting us all along. I made my decision. Dr. Chen, I said, when you get out of here, I need you to tell them something. Tell them what we found. Tell them about the Sasquatch, about how they're the real guardians of this place. Make them understand. What do you mean, when I get out? Aren't you coming? I shook my head. Someone has to go back for those permits. Someone has to stop this, Cynthia. Leader must have understood what I was thinking. It raised one enormous hand. and the trees parted, making a path back to the station. At the same time, another path opened in the opposite direction, an escape route for the others. Dr. Chen grabbed my arm. "You'll die in there." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe I'll finally learn what it really means to be a forest guardian." I started, walking back toward the station. Behind me, I heard Dr. Chen and the others running the other way, toward safety. The trees closed behind them like a curtain. The journey back was strange. The vines didn't grab at me anymore. The branches moved aside to let me pass. It was like the forest was holding its breath, waiting to see what I would do. I found the permits right where I'd left them. As I picked them up, I heard the chainsaws getting louder. They were almost here. That's when I felt it, a sort of tugging in my mind. The leader was showing me one last thing. Not a vision this time, but a choice. I could destroy the permits and leave, maybe survive to fight the development another day, or I could become something else, something more than human, a true guardian of the forest. I made my choice. I pressed my hand against the nearest tree trunk. The bark felt warm, alive. Slowly, gently, it started to wrap around my fingers. I didn't pull away. The wood grew up my arm, across my chest, around my legs. But I wasn't scared. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. The last thing I saw with human eyes was the rescue team breaking through into the grove. They found the station empty. They found the permits torn to pieces on my desk. But they never found me. They say if you walk in Redwood National Park these days, you might hear a strange voice in the wind. They say sometimes the trees whisper warnings to lost hikers, helping them find their way back to the trails. They say the forest seems more alive than ever. They're right about that last part. The forest is alive. And now I'm alive with it. The development project was canceled. Dr. Chen's research paper about the mysterious ecosystem of the redwood forest made sure this place would be protected forever. The Sasquatch still live here, still guard their home, and so do I in my own way. So if you ever visit these woods, remember the forest is watching, we're all watching, and we'll be here, protecting this place for as long as the trees stand. Just don't be surprised if sometimes the trees whisper back. I've seen a lot of weird things in my 15 years as a park ranger at the Grand Canyon, but nothing like what happened that summer. My name is Rachel Blackhawk, and I used to think the scariest things I'd ever face were in my Air Force days. I was wrong. It started with the lightning. Beautiful sunny day, not a cloud in sight, and boom, a bolt of lightning struck Bright Angel Point, leaving a black scorch mark on the red rocks. I was doing my usual morning patrol when it happened, and I nearly jumped out of my boots. The tourists around me screamed and ran for cover, but there was nowhere to hide from a clear blue sky. "That's impossible," I muttered, squinting up at the cloudless Arizona sky. In all my years of weather watching, both as a pilot and a ranger, I'd never seen anything like it. But that was just the beginning. The next day, 3 more lightning strikes, all in perfect weather. Then 5 the day after that, always in different spots, always without warning. The weird part? They seemed to be following a pattern, like someone was drawing something across the canyon with lightning. Then, people started disappearing. First, it was Jake Martinez, one of our most experienced rock climbers. He was halfway up Cathedral Rock, securely anchored and with all the right gear. His climbing partner, Sarah, said she looked up to check on him, and he was just gone. Harness still attached to the rope, but no Jake. I heard this sound, Sarah told me, her hands shaking as she held a cup of coffee in our ranger station. Like thunder, but different, more like giant wings flapping. Then whoosh, he vanished. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. "You think I'm crazy, don't you, Ranger Blackhawk?" I didn't, because by then, I'd heard that sound too. The helicopter incident really got everyone's attention. Tourist flight, 6 passengers, experienced pilot. They reported severe turbulence out of nowhere. Then the chopper started spinning like a leaf in the wind. The pilot said something huge had darkened the entire windshield for a split second. They barely made it back to the helipad. That's when I started digging into the old stories. My grandmother used to tell me tales about the thunderbirds. Massive. Creatures that could control the weather. I always thought they were just stories to keep kids from wandering too far from home. But sitting in the Cultural Center's archive room, surrounded by dusty books and faded photographs, I found something that made my blood run cold. A series of petroglyphs dated over 1,000 years old showed exactly what was happening now. Giant birds, lightning bolts from clear skies, people being carried away, and something else, drawings of ancient battles in the sky with symbols I recognized from my grandmother's stories. They weren't just stories about the thunderbirds. They were warnings. I was copying down the symbols when my radio crackled. "Ranger Blackhawk, come in." It was Tommy, one of our new rangers. His voice was shaking. "There's something huge circling over Desert View Tower. The sky just went dark, but there's no clouds. And that sound. Oh God, that sound." The radio went dead with a crack of static. I grabbed my gear and ran for my truck. The whole time, my grandmother's words echoed in my head. "When thunder speaks in a clear sky, the old ones have returned, and they're hungry." I had no idea then that I wasn't just heading toward another rescue mission. I was driving straight into a war that had been waiting to restart for centuries, and somewhere above the canyon, something with a 30-foot wingspan was watching me come. My truck's tires kicked up dust as I raced toward Desert View Tower. The radio was dead silent. Not just Tommy's channel, but all of them. That never happens. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, like just before a big storm hits. I pulled into the parking lot and jumped out. The tower stood tall against the sky, but something was wrong. The air felt heavy, like when you're underwater, and it was quiet. No birds, no tourist chatter, nothing. "Tommy!" I called out, my voice sounding flat in the thick air. "Tommy, where are you?" That's when I heard it. The sound Sarah had described, like thunder, but alive somehow, like giant wings beating the air. I looked up and my whole world changed. It was blocking out the sun. At first, my brain couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. Wings stretched wider than a small plane, dark as storm clouds. A head bigger than my truck, with eyes that glowed like lightning. It wasn't a bird, not really. It was like someone had taken every scary story about thunderstorms and turned them into something alive. The thunderbird. I'd seen plenty of eagles in my time at the canyon. This thing made them look like sparrows. It wheeled overhead, and where its wings cut through the air, little lightning bolts crackled in its wake. "Ranger Blackhawk," Tommy's voice, weak but alive. I spotted him huddled under the tower's viewing platform. Smart kid. He'd found some cover. I started running toward him, but the air suddenly felt like molasses. Above us, the thunderbird opened its beak, and the sound that came out, it was like standing next to a jet engine. The ground shook. "Stay where you are," I shouted to Tommy. "Don't move." I keyed my radio again, desperate for backup. "This is Ranger Blackhawk at Desert View. We have a..." What was I supposed to say? Giant mythical bird. "We have an emergency situation. Need immediate evacuation support." Static answered me, but then a voice broke through. "Copy that, Ranger. Helicopter en route." No, the chopper wouldn't stand a chance. "Negative. Cancel air support." I repeat, cancel. Too late. I heard the helicopter before I saw it coming up from the south. It was one of our rescue birds, painted bright orange for visibility. The pilot must have seen the Thunderbird because the chopper suddenly jerked to the side. The creature's head snapped toward the sound. Its eyes flashed, literally flashed like camera bulbs, and a bolt of lightning speared through the air, toward the helicopter. The pilot was good. They rolled hard right, barely dodging. But the Thunderbird was faster than anything that big had a right to be. It pulled its wings in and dove. "Get down!" I screamed, but I couldn't even hear myself. Over the thunder that followed, the helicopter's rotors screamed as the pilot tried to turn away. For a second, I thought they'd make it. Then the Thunderbird's wing clipped the tail rotor. The helicopter spun like a top. I watched in horror as the crew door flew open and someone fell. Their parachute opened. Thank God they'd been wearing one. But the wind was all wrong. It was pulling them toward the canyon, not away from it. The helicopter somehow stayed in the air, trailing smoke as it retreated. But the Thunderbird wasn't done. It wheeled around for another pass. That's when 15 years of Air Force training kicked in. I knew what it was doing. It was flying a standard attack pattern just like we used to practice, which meant, Tommy, when I say run, head straight for the tower door. Not before. Understand? He nodded, eyes wide with fear. The Thunderbird banked hard left, exactly what I expected. Now! I shouted. We ran. Behind us, lightning struck where we'd been standing. The boom was deafening, but we didn't stop. We crashed through the tower, dug and slammed it shut just as another lightning bolt hit. Inside, we huddled against the wall, breathing hard. Through the small window, I watched the Thunderbird circle once, twice, then fly off toward the canyon. What? Tommy gasped. What? Was that thing? Something that shouldn't exist, I said. But it does, and now we have to figure out how to stop it. I pulled out my phone and called up a picture I'd taken of those ancient petroglyphs. The symbols around the bird drawings meant something. They had to. My grandmother hadn't just told stories about the Thunderbirds. She'd talked about how our ancestors had fought them. First, I told Tommy, we need to find that parachutist. Then we need to get back to the cultural center. There's something in those old stories we're missing. Thunder rolled across the clear sky outside. The Thunderbird was still out there, and somehow I knew this was just the beginning. I looked at my hands, they were steady, fear was still there, but now I had something else too. A plan. I'd fought in the air before, sure, never against anything like this, but combat is combat. The Thunderbird might rule the skies, but it had patterns, weaknesses. We just had to find them. Ready to become a cryptozoologist? I asked Tommy with a grim smile. He looked at me like I was crazy, but he nodded. Better than being bird food. Outside, another storm was brewing. We had work to do and not much time to do it. The cultural center's basement was quiet except for the sound of rain hitting the small windows near the ceiling. After what happened at Desert View Tower, we'd found the parachutist, thankfully alive, and brought together a small team to figure out our next move. None of us expected what we found in those old boxes of artifacts. Look at this, said Maria, one of our archaeologists. She held up what looked like an arrow, but it was strange. The tip wasn't made of stone or metal. It seemed to glow faintly blue in the dim light. These were stored with warning labels. The notes say they're storm-piercing arrows. I reached for the arrow, but Maria pulled it back. Careful, they're supposed to be powerful enough to hurt Thunderbirds. The notes say they can attract lightning. Thunder boomed outside, making us all jump. It had been storming for hours now, but this was different. The sound seemed to come from multiple directions at once. Rachel. Tommy was at the window, his face pale. You need to see this. I climbed up on a chair to look out. What I saw made my heart stop. 3 Thunderbirds circled the canyon. 3. The one we'd seen before was in the lead. I could tell by its size. The others were slightly smaller, but just as terrifying. Lightning danced between them like they were playing catch with it. They're hunting as a family group, Maria whispered, just like eagles do. A crash of thunder shook dust from the ceiling. One of the smaller Thunderbirds dove into the canyon, and a few seconds later we heard screaming from outside. The hiking group. Tommy grabbed his radio. There's still people on Bright Angel Trail. I snatched up my pack. Maria, bring those arrows. Tommy, call everyone off the trails now. We ran for the door, but another boom stopped us. This one wasn't thunder. It was something hitting the building. Hard. Get to the cave tunnels, I ordered. The cultural center had been built near some old caves, and we'd mapped them out years ago. They'll be safer than this wooden building. We made it to the cave entrance just as the roof of the cultural center creaked. Through the entrance, I watched in horror as one of the smaller Thunderbirds landed on top of the building. Its claws dug into the wood like it was paper. Don't move, I breathed. We pressed ourselves against the cave wall. The Thunderbird's head snaked down past the windows, trying to look inside the building. This close, I could see every detail. Its feathers weren't really feathers. They looked more like living storm clouds. Little sparks ran across them constantly. Maria
clutched the arrows to her chest. They were glowing brighter now, humming softly.
The Thunderbird's head snapped toward our cave. It knew we were here, deeper in. I pushed everyone ahead of me as the cave mouth exploded with lightning. The boom was deafening in the enclosed space. My ears rang as we ran through the twisting tunnel. We came to a larger cave room and stopped to catch our breath. That's when we saw the paintings on the walls. They were everywhere, glowing slightly in the dim light from our flashlights. Pictures of Thunderbirds, but also of people fighting them. And the weapons they held in the paintings. Look. Maria pointed her light at a section of wall. These symbols match the ones on the arrows. I studied the paintings. They showed people using the arrows, but not just shooting them. They were holding them up, and the lightning seemed to be flowing into them. They're not just weapons, I realized. They're lightning rods. The old ones found a way to control the Thunderbird's power. Another boom echoed through the cave. They were trying to dig us out. There's more, Tommy said, pointing to another painting. It showed a circle of the arrows stuck in the ground with a Thunderbird trapped inside. They're tools for trapping them too. The cave shook again. Rocks fell from the ceiling. We need to move, I said. There should be another way out through the lower caves. And now we have a plan. What are you thinking? Maria asked as we started moving. I smiled grimly. They want to hunt? Fine. But this time, we're setting the trap. We worked our way deeper, into the caves, following the old maps I remembered from ranger training. Behind us, the Thunderbirds screamed in frustration as their prey escaped. But they didn't know these caves like we did. And they didn't know what we'd found. First, I said as we walked, we need to understand how these arrows work. Then we need to figure out where to set our trap. The Thunderbirds are smart. They'll know if something's too obvious. The old lookout tower, Tommy suggested. It's the highest point for miles. If they think we're cornered up there, they'll have to come for us, I finished. Perfect. Maria held up one of the arrows. In the darkness of the cave, its glow seemed stronger. Whatever we do, she said, we better do it fast. That storm up there isn't natural, and it's getting worse. She was right. Even down here, we could feel it. The air was thick with electricity. The Thunderbirds weren't just hunting anymore. They were changing the weather itself. And somehow, we had to stop them before the storm they were creating destroyed everything. The old lookout tower creaked in the wind as I checked my harness one last time. Below me, the Grand Canyon was hidden under swirling black clouds. Lightning flashed every few seconds, turning the world's strange shades of purple and blue. Are you sure about this? Tommy asked, helping me secure the ancient arrows to my belt. We'd made it here through the cave system, coming up right under the tower. No, I admitted, but we're out of options. Maria finished placing the last arrow in a circle around the tower base. They glowed brighter now, like they knew what was coming. The paintings showed 7 arrows in the circle, she said. We only have 6. Then we better not miss with the ones we have. I took a deep breath. Remember the plan. Once I'm up in the helicopter, you two stay inside the arrow circle. It should protect you. Should. We were betting our lives on centuries-old weapons we barely understood. The helicopter appeared out of the clouds right on time. Sarah was piloting. She'd insisted on helping after what happened to Jake. The chopper hovered as close to the tower as she dared. Now or never, I said. Tommy grabbed my arm. Rachel, yes, good luck. I nodded and started climbing. The wind tried to tear me off the tower, but I'd trained for this. One hand over the other, don't look down. Lightning flashed so close I could smell it, like burning metal. I was almost to the helicopter when I heard it. That wing-beating thunder sound, but louder than ever before. They were coming. The biggest Thunderbird burst through the clouds. Its wings cut through the air like dark knives, and lightning danced all around it. The 2 smaller ones followed, and now I could see how they worked together. They flew in perfect formation, like fighter jets. I reached for the helicopter's skid just as the first lightning bolt hit the tower. The whole structure shook, but The arrows below lit up like emergency flares. The lightning curved away at the last second, drawn to the arrows instead of the tower. "It's working!" I heard Maria shout. The Thunderbirds screamed, a sound like tearing metal. The big one dove straight for me. "Hold on!" Sarah yelled through my headset. She yanked the helicopter sideways just as massive claws slashed through the air where we'd been. I pulled myself into the chopper and grabbed one of the arrows. Up close, the Thunderbirds were even bigger than before. The leader's wingspan had to be at least 40 feet now. Its eyes locked onto me, glowing with the same blue light as the arrows. It knew what we were trying to do. "We need to get higher," I told Sarah, "above the canyon rim." She pulled back on the stick and we climbed. All 3 Thunderbirds followed. Perfect. I leaned out the door, arrow ready. The helicopter felt tiny compared to these creatures, like a mouse trying to fight eagles. But I had something they didn't expect. The first smaller Thunderbird came at us from the left. I held up the arrow, and suddenly I could feel the electricity in the air flowing into it. The arrow pulled my arm like a magnet, pointing right at the creature's chest. I let it fly. The arrow streaked through the air, trailing blue light. The Thunderbird tried to dodge, but the arrow followed it like a heat-seeking missile. When it hit, the creature's whole body lit up like a lightning strike. It fell back, shrieking. "One down!" Sarah called. But our victory was short-lived. The leader Thunderbird rose up right in front of us, so close its wing nearly clipped our rotors. This close, I could see intelligence in its eyes. It wasn't just angry. It was thinking, planning. Lightning gathered around its wings, more than I'd ever seen. The air crackled. "Sarah, dive!" We dropped just as lightning filled the sky above us. It was like flying through a waterfall of electricity. Warning lights flashed all over the helicopter's dashboard. "We're losing power," Sarah shouted. I grabbed another arrow, but the Thunderbird was ready. Its wing smashed into the helicopter's tail, sending us into a spin. Tools and equipment flew everywhere. I barely held onto my harness. "Mayday, mayday!" Sarah fought with the controls. Through the spinning, I saw the second smaller Thunderbird coming in for the kill. I had one chance. I raised the arrow, feeling the electricity surge through it. The arrow flew straight and true, hitting the second Thunderbird in its wing. It fell away, disappearing into the clouds. But we were still spinning, and the ground was getting closer. "Jump!" Sarah yelled. "I'll try to land it." "Not without you." The leader Thunderbird dove toward us, its claws extended. In that moment, I made a decision. I wrapped my arm around Sarah, pulled her from her seat, and jumped. We fell through lightning-filled air. The parachute opened with a snap, but the wind was chaos. Above us, our helicopter crashed into the canyon wall in a ball of fire. The leader Thunderbird wheeled around for one final attack. I had one arrow left, one chance. As the huge creature dove at us, I remembered my grandmother's stories. The Thunderbirds weren't evil. They were guardians who'd lost their way. They needed to be sent home. I raised the last arrow. "I'm sorry," I whispered. The arrow hit the Thunderbird right in the chest. Blue light exploded outward like a star going supernova. The creature screamed one last time, but this cry was different, almost peaceful. Then everything went quiet. The clouds broke apart. The Thunderbirds were gone, leaving only scattered feathers that dissolved into mist. Sarah and I landed inside the arrow circle, where Tommy and Maria rushed to help us. Above us, the sky was blue again. Normal, but we all knew things would never really be normal again. "Did we kill them?" Tommy asked quietly. I picked up one of the arrows we'd placed around the tower. Its light was fading. "No," I said. "We sent them home to wherever they came from. Will they come back?" I looked up at the empty sky. My bones ached, and I could feel electricity still buzzing under my skin, a reminder I'd carry forever. Maybe. Someday. And when they do, we'll be ready, Maria finished. Later, writing my report, I left out most of what really happened. Who'd believe it? But I kept one of the arrows, now dark and quiet, in my desk, just in case. Because sometimes on quiet nights when storms roll in, I swear I can hear wings beating in the thunder. And the arrow glows, ever so faintly, like it's saying hello to an old friend, or maybe it's saying warning. I've been a cave rescue specialist for 15 years, but nothing prepared me for what I found in Mammoth Cave that summer of 1997. My name is Michael Reynolds, and this is my story. I wish I could forget it, but some horrors stick with you forever. Started with the echoes. Wrong echoes. Anyone who works in caves knows how sound travels through them, but these were different. I was doing my regular evening patrol when I heard what sounded like children laughing. Deep in the cave, at 9 p.m. with no tour groups around. "Hello?" I called out, shining my flashlight down the limestone corridor. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing the familiar rocky walls I'd seen 1,000 times before. But something felt off. The air was different, colder than usual. The laughter echoed again, this time from behind me. I spun around, heart pounding. Empty passage. Just the drip, drip, drip of water from the stalactites. That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. There was a new tunnel in the wall. I'd walked this path every day for 6 years. But this opening, this black mouth in the rock, had never been there before. I radioed back to base. "Dave, you there? When did we get new tunnels in Section C?" Static crackled. Then Dave's confused voice. "What new tunnels? Section C hasn't changed since the 50s. I stepped closer. To the opening, shining my light inside. The beam seemed to get swallowed up by the darkness. And was it just me? Or did the rocks look different? Smoother, almost like they'd been melted. That was just the beginning. Over the next week, 3 separate groups of cave explorers went missing. We found their equipment scattered through. Different tunnels. Climbing ropes sliced clean through. Helmets cracked open like eggs and flashlights crushed to pieces. But no bodies. Just long smears of blood that led to solid rock walls. The worst part was the markings. Ancient-looking drawings started appearing on the walls overnight. Stick figures running from something tall and dark. Warnings in languages I'd never seen before. Our Native American experts said some symbols matched 1,000-year-old cave paintings warning about those who dwell in stone. Things got weirder every day. My instrument stopped working right. Compasses spun in circles. The temperature would drop 30 degrees in seconds, then shoot back up just as fast. Sometimes we'd see lights deep in the tunnels, like floating balls of blue fire, but they'd vanish when we got close. I remember standing in one of the new tunnels looking at my thermometer as it went crazy. That's when I heard it. Not laughter this time, but a sound that still haunts my dreams. Like stone grinding against stone, but with something else mixed in. Something that sounded almost like words. I switched off my flashlight, hoping to better hear where it was coming from. Big mistake. In the pitch black, I felt something brush against my arm. Something cold and rough, like sandpaper. I jerked away and slammed my back into the wall. When I turned my light back on, the tunnel looked normal. But there was a new marking on the wall. It wasn't there before, I swear it wasn't. A crude drawing of a man with a flashlight, and behind him, a shape. A horrible shape that hurt my eyes to look at. I ran. Yeah, I'm not ashamed to admit it. 20 years of cave rescue experience, and I ran like a scared kid. Because for the first time, I realized we weren't dealing with cave-ins or lost hikers or underground streams. There was something down here with us. Something that could move through solid rock like it was water. Something that had been here long before us and it was hungry. Back at the ranger station, I started making calls. I needed help, real help. Not just other rangers, but people who knew about the weird stuff. The things that don't make it into official reports. Because I knew one thing for sure. Whatever was down in those caves, it wasn't natural. And it was getting bolder. Little did I know, this was just the beginning. The real horror was still waiting for us, deep in the darkness below. And it was about to show us exactly what it could do. 2 days later, I stood at the cave entrance with my new team. There were 6 of us. Me, 2 expert cavers named Tom and Rick, a geologist named Dr. Wright, a local historian named Mary, and Bill Thompson, an old Native American guide who knew more about these caves than anyone alive. "Remember," I told them, checking our radio equipment, "we stick together. No wandering off, no matter what we see or hear. Bill touched the cave wall and frowned. The stone feels wrong, he said quietly, like it's breathing. I knew what he meant. The whole cave felt alive now in a way I couldn't explain. We walked deeper inside, our footsteps echoing off the walls. Everyone was quiet, just the sound of our breathing and gear clinking. That's when we saw it. The first real proof we weren't alone. We turned a corner and our lights hit something that made us all stop. The rock wall was moving, not shaking or crumbling, but flowing like thick syrup. And in the middle of it, half formed in the stone, was what looked like a face. "Nobody move," I whispered. We all stood frozen, watching. The face pushed out from the wall, stone dripping off it like water. It had no eyes, just smooth rock where they should be. Then it opened its mouth, a black hole in the granite, and slid back into the wall. Rick threw up. "I don't blame him. We need to leave," Mary said, her voice shaking. "Now!" But we couldn't. More people had gone missing while we were getting the team together. A family of 3 this time. Their 8-year-old son's teddy bear was found deep, one of the new tunnels. We pressed on, taking samples and pictures. Dr. Wright's instruments were going crazy. "These readings are impossible," she kept saying. "The rock density keeps changing. It's like the cave is rearranging itself." Then Tom screamed. We spun around just in time to see him being pulled into the wall. Not dragged, pulled through. Solid rock like it was quicksand. Rick grabbed his hand but couldn't hold on. In seconds, Tom was gone. We found him an hour later, or what was left of him. His body was stuck in the cave ceiling, fused with the rock, like he'd been pushed up through the stone and frozen there. His face. I still see his face in my nightmares. "It's a skinwalker," Bill said, his voice trembling. "But not like any I've heard of. This one's older, much older. It learned to become the stone itself." That's when the walls started whispering. Not echoes this time, real whispers. They sounded like Tom, begging for help, telling us to come closer. Dr. Wright's flashlight died first, then Mary's. One by one our lights went out, leaving us in complete darkness. The whispers got louder. "Closer. Form a circle," I shouted. "Backs together." In the dark, I felt something brush against my face. Not cold stone this time. It was warm, breathing. I heard Rick start to scream, but the sound cut off suddenly. When I finally got my backup light working, he was gone. Just gone. We ran. What else could we do? But the cave had changed again. New tunnels everywhere. Old ones gone. It was hurting us, I realized, leading us deeper. "There," Mary pointed at markings on the wall. Ancient drawings, but fresh-looking, like they'd just been carved. They showed people being led down, 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 to something waiting in the depths. "We need to go back," Dr. Wright pleaded. "We can't," Bill said. "Look behind us." The tunnel we'd come through was gone. Just smooth rock wall now, and on it, appearing as we watched, a new drawing carved itself. A group of people running, being chased by something that lived in the stone, being chased down to where it lived, down to where it could show us what it really was. The cave floor, cracked under our feet. Before we could move, it crumbled away, sending us plunging into the darkness below. As we fell, I swear I heard laughter, not an echo this time, real laughter, coming from the rock itself. The fall seemed to last forever. When we finally hit bottom, we were somewhere deep, deeper than any mapped part of Mammoth Cave. My backup flashlight showed we were in a massive cavern, bigger than a football field. Dr. Wright was holding her arm, probably broken. Mary had a bad cut on her head. Bill was the only one besides me who wasn't hurt, but that wasn't what made us stare. The walls of this cavern were covered in handprints, thousands of them. Some were adult-sized, some were tiny, child-sized, and they all looked like the people had been pressing against the rock, trying to get away from something. "Look at this," Mary whispered, shining her light on the cave floor. There were old items scattered everywhere. A rusty miner's helmet from maybe 100 years ago. A rotting leather boot that looked even older. A plastic toy car that must have belonged to some kid in the 1970s. All the missing people through all the years. Then we saw the drawings. These weren't like the ones above. These were older, much older. They showed the thing that lived in the rock. The pictures made my eyes hurt and my head spin, but I could make out enough. It wasn't just one creature. It was many, all connected, living inside the stone itself. The cave wasn't just its home. The cave was its body. "This is wrong," Dr. Wright said, her voice shaking. "We shouldn't be here. We shouldn't be seeing this." She was right. Being in that cavern felt like being in a church, but an evil one. Like we were seeing something humans weren't supposed to know about. That's when Bill started laughing. It wasn't his normal laugh. It sounded wrong, like rocks grinding together. He turned to look at us, and his face was changing. The skin was turning gray and rough, like stone. "Bill?" I stepped back. "Bill, fight it." "Bill's gone," he said, but his voice wasn't human anymore. "They're all gone, and now you know why," Mary screamed. Parts of Bill's body were sinking into the rock floor like he was melting into it. But he kept talking. So many years, so many people coming down here. Never enough. The hunger never stops. Dr. Wright grabbed my arm. "Michael, look at the walls." The handprints were moving. Like the people who made them were still there. Still pressing against the rock, still trying to escape. And now we could hear them. Thousands of voices, crying, begging, screaming. I saw Tom's face push out of the wall. Then Rick's. Then the faces of people I'd seen in missing person reports going back years. They were all here. They'd always been here. "Your minds are opening now." Bill's voice came from everywhere. "You're starting to understand. Starting to see." He was right. My head was filling with pictures I didn't want to see. Cities under the earth. Things that lived in stone before humans existed. A hunger as old as the planet itself. "Stop it." Mary clutched her head. "Make it stop." Dr. Wright started walking toward the wall, her eyes empty. I grabbed her arm, but she fought me. "It's so beautiful," she whispered. "Can't you see? We can be part of it, part of everything." The wall reached out for her. Not just reached. The stone flowed like water, trying to pull her in. I held on as hard as I could, but she kept fighting me. "Let me go," she screamed. "I want to join them. I want to—" Her voice cut off as the rock covered her face. I lost my grip, and just like that, she was gone. Just another handprint on the wall. "Only one way out now," the thing that used to be Bill said. His body was almost completely merged with the floor. "Go deeper. See the truth. All of it." The ground cracked open again, showing a tunnel leading down. Wind rushed up from it, carrying whispers in languages that had never been human. Mary grabbed my hand. We were the only ones left. "We have to go down," she said. "It won't let us go back." She was right. The way we'd fallen in was gone, sealed up like it had never existed. The only way out was through that new tunnel, through whatever waited at the very bottom of this place. As we started climbing down, I heard Bill's last words echo through the cave. "Welcome to where it all begins, where it all ends. Welcome to the deep dark." Mary and I climbed down into that last tunnel for what felt like hours. Our flashlights barely worked anymore, giving off just enough light to see a few feet ahead. The air got thicker the deeper we went, making it hard to breathe. "Michael," Mary whispered, "the rocks, they're moving." She was right. The tunnel walls weren't solid anymore. They flowed like slow-moving water, but made of stone. Faces and hands kept forming in them, reaching for us, then melting away. I recognized some of them. Dr. Wright, Rick, Tom, and dozens of others I'd seen in missing person reports over the years. Then we reached the bottom, and I finally understood true horror. We were in a cave bigger than anything I'd ever seen. But it wasn't just a cave. It was alive. The whole thing was one giant living thing. The floor pulsed like a heartbeat. The walls weren't walls at all. They were skin made of rock, breathing in and out. And in the center of it all was something that hurt my mind to look at. Imagine a tree made of stone, but alive and moving. Now imagine it's made of thousands of people, all merged together, all screaming silently. That's the closest I can come to describing what we saw. Beautiful, isn't? See, the voice came from everywhere. It sounded like Bill, like Dr. Wright, like everyone the cave had ever taken, all speaking together. This is what you came to find. Mary grabbed my arm. Michael, look at your feet. The stone floor was creeping up my legs like quicksetting. Cement. Mary was already knee-deep in it. You'll join us now, the voices said. Everyone does in the end. Come part of the deep dark, part of the forever. I tried to pull my legs free, but the stone kept climbing higher. Mary was screaming next to me, already waist-deep in the rock. Help me, she cried. Please, Michael, help me. I reached for her hand, but as our fingers touched, her eyes went wide. Her skin turned gray and rough. Oh, she said softly, I see it now. I see everything. Then she was gone, pulled into the floor like she'd never been there. Just another part of the living. The stone was up to my chest now. My mind started filling with visions. Cities under the earth, creatures older than time, a hunger that never ended. I understood now why some of the victims had walked into the rock willingly. The knowledge was too big, too much for a human. Mine to hold. But something in me refused to give up. I had a flare in my pocket, my last one. With my one free arm, I pulled it out and lit it. The thing in the center of the room didn't like that. The whole cave shuddered. Light, the voices hissed. The burning light! The flare showed me something the flashlights hadn't. Cracks in the ceiling, leading all the way up to the surface. Real cracks, not the ones the thing made. Natural weaknesses in the rock. Had one chance. I threw the flare at the ceiling as hard as I could. At the same time, I pulled out my backup flares. Against protocol to carry so many, but I'd had a feeling we'd need them. I lit them all at once and threw them too. The cave screamed. Not with voices this time, but with a sound like mountains breaking. The ceiling started to collapse. No! The voices roared. You cannot! The stone around my body loosened as the thing lost control. I pulled free and ran. Huge chunks of real rock were falling now, tons of it crushing everything below. The whole cave system was coming down. I ran upward through the falling rocks, following the natural cracks. My lungs burned. Rocks hit me, cut me, but I kept going. Behind me, I heard the thing screaming, trying to stop the collapse, trying to pull everything back together. I don't remember how I made it out. The next thing I knew, I was lying on the ground outside the cave entrance, watching it collapse in on itself. The Rangers found me there an hour later. That was 3 months ago. They sealed off that whole section of Mammoth Cave, said it was due to natural collapse. But sometimes late at night, I put my hand against my bedroom wall and feel it. A pulse. A whisper. The thing down there isn't dead. You can't kill something that old, that big. It's just sleeping now, waiting. And sometimes when everything is quiet, I hear voices in the walls. Mary's voice, Bill's voice, all of them calling me to come back down, to join them in the deep dark, because now I know the truth. Every cave, every tunnel, every mine on Earth might be connected, might be part of its body, and it's always hungry, always waiting for more. So take my advice. Next time you're in a cave and you hear strange echoes, or feel like the walls are watching you, get out as fast as you can, because the rocks remember us, and they're always reaching for more. The night I saw it, everything changed. I've been a park ranger here in the Everglades for 12 years, and I've seen all sorts of things. Alligators longer than my boat, snakes thick as tree trunks, and birds that look like they flew straight out of a dinosaur movie. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for what I found in the murky waters that night. My name is Daniel Cooper. Most folks around here just call me Dan. I used to be a marine biologist before I took this job at the park, which means I know pretty much everything there is to know about water creatures. Or at least I thought I did. It all started 3 weeks ago. I was doing my usual evening patrol, cruising down River's Edge. That's what we call the winding stretch. of water that cuts through the darkest part of the swamp. The air was thick and humid, like it always is down here in Florida. Mosquitoes were buzzing around my head, and somewhere in the distance, a bullfrog was singing its evening song. I remember checking my watch. 8:42 p.m. The sun had just dipped, below the cypress trees, leaving everything in that weird twilight that makes the swamp look like something from another world. My flashlight beam bounced off the black water, creating weird shadows that danced between the hanging moss. That's when I heard it. A splash that was way too big to be a gator, too big to be anything I knew lived in these waters. I killed the boat's engine and listened. The swamp went quiet, and I mean dead quiet. No frogs, no crickets, nothing. In all my years here, I'd never heard the Everglades this silent. It was like everything was holding its breath, waiting. The radio on my belt crackled, making me jump. It was Sarah from the main office. "Dan, you out there? We've got reports of something strange near marker 47. Some tourists saying they saw, well, they're pretty shaken up. Can you check it out?" I grabbed the radio. "Copy that. I'm actually pretty close. What exactly did they see?" There was a pause, a long one. "They're not making much sense, Dan. Something about a shape in the water. Said it was bigger than their boat. Had eyes that glowed like flashlights. Probably just saw a big gator, but you know how tourists get." I knew better. Tourists might exaggerate, but they don't usually make up stories that make them sound crazy. And they definitely don't all decide to stay quiet and leave the park without taking pictures, which is exactly what Sarah told me they did. As I started the engine, again, my flashlight caught something on the water's surface about 50 feet ahead. At first I thought it was a log, but logs don't move against the current, and they definitely don't have rows of bumps that look almost like spines. By the time I swung my light back, whatever it was had vanished beneath the black water. But I knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning of something big. Something that would change everything I thought I knew about the creatures living in these waters. And somewhere deep in my gut, I knew I was probably the only person who could figure out what it was. I steered my boat toward marker 47, moving slower than usual. Every splash made me tense up. My flashlight kept catching little ripples in the water, but nothing like what I'd seen before. When I got to where the tourists had been, I found their camera floating in the water. Just a regular tourist camera, bright yellow, waterproof. Must have dropped it in their hurry to leave. I fished it out with my net, but when I tried to turn it on, nothing happened. Either the battery was dead, or something else was wrong with it. That's when I heard voices calling from the shore. I turned my boat toward the sound and found Mike Thompson, one of our night security guards, standing with Dr. Linda Martinez. Linda's our local wildlife expert. She usually comes out to help when we have animal problems. "Dan," Mike waved his flashlight, "you need to see this." I pulled up to the small wooden dock and tied off my boat. The boards creaked under our feet as I walked over to them. Linda was kneeling next to something on the dock, her face serious in the beam of her headlamp. "Look at these marks," she said, pointing to some deep scratches in the wood. They were fresh. The wood inside them still looked light-colored. Each scratch was about as wide as my thumb, and they were spaced like fingers, if fingers had claws. Whatever made these was pulling itself up onto the dock, Linda explained, running her hand along the marks. "But here's the weird thing. These scratches, they're not from any animal I know. Too big for a gator, wrong pattern for a snake." Mike shuffled his feet nervously. "That's not all. Show him the footprint, Linda." She led us to the end of the dock where the wood met the muddy shore. There, pressed deep into the mud, was a footprint unlike anything I'd ever seen. It was huge, bigger than my boot, and shaped almost like a frog's foot, but with long finger-like toes that had webs between them. "Found it about an hour ago," Mike said quietly. "It was still wet when I called Linda. I took out my phone and snapped some pictures. The whole thing felt wrong. In all my years studying marine life, I'd never seen anything that could make a print like this." "There's more," Linda said, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "We found some tissue caught on one of the pilings under the dock. I've never seen anything like it. It's almost like fish scales, but they're wrong somehow. I sent a sample to my lab. My radio crackled again, making us all jump. It was Sarah. Dan, we've got another report. Family camping at Site 12 says they heard something big moving around their tent. They're pretty scared. I looked at Linda and Micah's Site 12 was on the other side of River's Edge. Whatever this thing was, it was moving fast. I'll go check it out, I said, untying my boat. Linda, let me know the second you hear anything from the lab. As I pulled away from the dock, Linda called out, Dan, be careful. Whatever this is, it's not afraid of humans. I nodded and pointed my boat towards Site 12, my heart pounding. The moon was rising now, turning the swamp water silver in places. Every shadow could be hiding something. Every ripple could mean danger. And somewhere out there, something big was moving through my swamp. Something that wasn't supposed to exist. The trip to Site 12 felt longer than usual. Every few minutes I'd hear splashing in the dark water around my boat. Wasn't the normal nighttime sounds of the swamp. These splashes were too heavy, too purposeful. When I reached the campsite, I found the family huddled in their car instead of their tent. The dad rolled down his window just enough to talk to me. His hands were shaking as he held onto the steering wheel. It was right outside our tent, he said, his voice trembling. We heard it breathing, heavy breathing, like something big. Then it started clicking, making these weird clicking sounds. His young daughter spoke up from the back seat. I saw its eyes, Mr. Ranger. They were yellow like Mom's highlighters, and they were way up high, higher than our tent. I asked them to wait in their car while I checked things out. The beam of my flashlight showed deep impressions in the mud around their tent. The same kind of footprints we'd found at the dock, only these were fresher. Water was still slowly seeping into them. That's when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Linda. Lab results back. You need to see this now. I made sure the family was safely escorted out of the park by Mike, then headed back to the research station where Linda worked. The whole way there, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following my boat, staying just out of sight beneath the water. Linda was waiting for me outside the station. Her face looked pale in the porch lights. Dan, look at this, she said, leading me to her microscope. The tissue we found, it's nothing like we've ever seen before. It's like a mix between fish scales and amphibian skin, but the cells are huge. Whatever this came from, it's big, really big. She showed me some pictures she'd taken through the microscope. Even I could tell these weren't normal. The patterns were all wrong. There's something else, Linda said, pulling out her tablet. I've been going through old reports from the park. Look at this. She showed me a file from 1987, almost 40 years ago. A ranger had reported something huge moving through the water at night. The next day they found scratches on trees and docks, exactly like the ones we'd found. It happened again in 1995, Linda continued, swiping to another report. And 2003 and 2014, always the same pattern. Something big appears, scares people for a few weeks, then vanishes without a trace. My heart was pounding. So whatever this is, it's been here all along? Just hiding? Linda nodded. But here's the scary part. Each time it comes back, there are more sightings, more evidence. It's getting braver. Suddenly, all the lights in the station went out. Through the window, I could see the dock lights were dead too. The whole place was pitch black. Linda's voice was barely a whisper. Dan, the backup generator is down by the water. I clicked on my flashlight, trying to keep my hand steady. I'll go check it. Don't. Linda grabbed my arm. Listen. In the darkness, we could hear it. That clicking sound the family had described. It was coming from right outside the station, and it was getting closer. The beam of my flashlight caught something moving past the window. Something tall. Something that shouldn't exist. For just a second, I saw those yellow eyes the little girl had described. Then everything went quiet. Too quiet. Just like that first night on River's Edge. We were trapped in the dark station. And whatever was out there, it knew exactly where we were. Linda and I backed away from the window, moving as quietly as we could. My flashlight beam shook as I pointed it at every little sound. The clicking noise moved around the building, like whatever was out there was looking for a way in. "The lab," Linda whispered. "It has a secure door." We crept down the hallway, trying not to bump into anything in the dark. The clicking got louder, then stopped. That was worse somehow, not knowing where it was. Just as we reached the lab door, we heard a new sound that made my blood run cold. The squeak of the back door opening. We'd forgotten to lock it. We rushed inside the lab and shut the heavy door. Behind us, Linda grabbed her phone and called the park police while I pushed a heavy filing cabinet against the door. The whole time, I could hear slow, heavy footsteps in the hallway. Wet footsteps like something that had just come out of the water. Then I remembered something that made my stomach drop. "Linda," I whispered, "what about the lab's glass wall?" One whole wall of the lab was made of glass, looking out over the swamp. It was great for watching wildlife during the day, but now, we both turned slowly toward the glass. Two bright yellow eyes stared back at us, higher than any animal I'd ever seen. They were at least 8 feet off the ground. In the dim light from our phones, I could finally see it clearly. It had dark, wet skin like a giant frog, but with patches of scales that gleamed like a fish's. Its head was huge, with a wide mouth full of teeth that looked sharp as knives. Long arms ended in webbed hands with claws, the same claws that had left those marks on the dock. But the scariest thing, it looked intelligent. Those yellow eyes weren't animal eyes. They were studying us, thinking. The creature pressed one of its huge hands against the glass. Water dripped down, leaving trails. It wasn't trying to break in, at least not yet. It was like it was curious about us. Linda's hand shook as she raised her phone. We need to document this. No one's ever seen it this clearly." The flash from her phone went off. That was a mistake. The creature's eyes narrowed. Its mouth opened in a snarl that showed all those teeth. The curious look was gone, replaced by something angry. It pulled back its arm and slammed it against the glass. A crack appeared. "The emergency exit," I said, grabbing Linda's arm. "Now!" We ran for the small door at the back of the lab just as the creature hit the glass again. The crack grew bigger. I fumbled with the door's lock with shaking hands. Behind us, another hit made the glass groan. "Dan." Linda's voice was barely a whisper. "Look at the wall." More yellow eyes had appeared in the darkness beyond the glass. 3 pairs, 4 pairs, 5. The creature wasn't alone. Crack. The glass finally started to give way, just as I got the emergency door open. We could hear sirens in the distance. The park police were coming, but they were still too far away. And now we knew the truth that had been hiding in the Everglades. All these years, not just one creature, a whole family of them. The glass wall shattered. The sound of shattering glass filled the air as Linda and I burst through the emergency exit. The cool night air hit our faces as we ran toward the parking lot. Behind us, we could hear the creatures entering the lab, their wet feet slapping against the floor. "The boat shed," I shouted. "We can lock ourselves in." We sprinted across the gravel path, our feet crunching with each step. The boat shed was made of solid concrete, much stronger than the lab's walls. It was where we kept all our rescue equipment. Just as we reached it, I heard that clicking sound again, but this time it came from different directions. They were trying to surround us. I yanked the door open and we dove inside. My hands trembled as I locked the heavy door behind us. Linda helped me push a large metal shelf in front of it. "The radio," Linda gasped, trying to catch her breath. "There's an emergency radio in here." I found it on a shelf and turned it on. Static filled the air, then a voice. "This is Park Police responding to emergency at Research Station. Over." "This is Ranger Cooper," I practically shouted into the radio. "We're in the boat shed. Multiple hostile creatures. You're not going to believe this, but..." A loud bang on the roof cut me off. Then another and another. They were up there. "The skylight," Linda pointed up. "They'll break through." She was right. The shed had a small skylight made of thick plastic. As we watched, a huge shadow passed over it. Then a clawed hand pressed against the plastic. But suddenly the hand pulled back. We heard strange clicking sounds from above, different from before, almost like they were talking to each other. The creatures on the roof moved away. The banging stopped. "What's happening?" Linda whispered. That's when we heard it. The sound of helicopters approaching, lots of them, and sirens getting closer. We stayed quiet, listening. There were splashing sounds from the water, growing more distant. The creatures were retreating. 5 minutes later, park police broke down the door to find us. The creatures were gone, leaving behind only wet footprints and broken glass. That was 3 days ago. The park is closed now while scientists and wildlife experts search the area. They found the creature's nest, a huge underwater cave system that no one knew existed. But the creatures themselves? They vanished into the deeper parts of the Everglades where even our best boats can't go. Linda's photos are being studied by experts from all over the world. They're calling it the Everglades amphibian, a species that somehow survived from prehistoric times by hiding in the deepest parts of the swamp. But here's the thing about the Everglades. It's huge, full of places we've never explored. The creatures are still out there, I know it. They're watching, waiting, protecting their home. I'm still working as a ranger, but things are different now. Every time I take my boat out at night, I keep my eyes on the water. Every splash makes me wonder. And sometimes, on really quiet nights, I hear that clicking sound in the distance. The tourists don't believe the story. They think it's just another tall tale, like Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster. But I know what I saw, I know what's hiding in these waters, and I know that somewhere in the dark parts of River's Edge, yellow eyes are watching, waiting, maybe for the right time to return, or maybe just making sure we don't venture too deep into their territory. After all, this is their home too. And some secrets of the Everglades are better left undisturbed. But I keep the radio close now, just in case. And I never ever patrol alone at night anymore. I never should have ignored the elders' warnings about Mount Rainier's shadows. Maybe if I had listened, my friends would still be alive. My name is Alex Wilson, and I've been a park ranger at Mount Rainier for 8 months now. Before this, I studied Native American cultures, which is probably why they sent me here after the weird stuff started happening. 3 hikers vanished last month, and their cameras were all we found. I still remember picking up that first camera, my hands shaking as I flipped through the photos. That's when I first saw them, shadows that shouldn't exist. In one picture, a shadow stretched up a rock wall, even though the sun was directly overhead. In another, a dark figure stood behind a hiker, but when I looked at the next photo taken seconds later, it was gone. I should mention that weird things seemed to follow me. At my last park in Oregon, I had to leave after investigating some strange caves. The official report says we found nothing, but that's not true. What we found in those caves made me request a transfer. But Mount Rainier, this is different. This is worse. Yesterday morning started like any other day. I was doing my usual trail check when I found another abandoned campsite. Everything was still there. Tent, sleeping bags, food, even wallets. No signs of bears or any struggle. Just empty like the people had vanished into thin air. But the creepiest part? Their camera was still there too. My hands were trembling so bad I could barely press the review button. The first few pictures were normal. Happy campers, beautiful sunset, mountain views. Then I saw it. In the last photo taken at night, dozens of human-shaped shadows stood in a circle around their tent. The shadows weren't connected to anything. They were just standing there, watching. I radioed back to base, trying to keep my voice steady. "Base, this is Wilson. Found another site, just like the others." Static was my only answer. I tried again. "Base, do you copy?" More static, then something else. Oh. Whisper, so faint I almost missed it. Words in a language I didn't know, but somehow understood. "You see us now." The temperature dropped so fast my breath turned to fog. That's when I noticed my own shadow on the ground. It was moving, but I wasn't. I've dealt with strange things before, but nothing like this. The local tribes have stories about Mount Rainier, about things that live in its shadows. I used to think they were just stories. Now I know better. Last week, I talked to Jimmy Red Feather, one of the tribal elders. He took one look at the photos and turned pale. Those who walk in shadows have always been here, he told me. Since before the mountain had a name. They watch, they wait, they take. Take what? I asked. His answer still gives me chills. Everything. I'm writing this down because people need to know what's happening here. The shadows are getting bolder. Last night during my patrol, I saw them again. Not in photos this time. With my own eyes. They stood at the edge of my flashlight beam, human shapes made of darkness deeper than the night. They're watching me as I write this. I can feel them. The way my shadow keeps twitching when I'm sitting perfectly still. The shapes I see moving in the corner of my office. The whispers in that ancient language getting louder each night. Something big is coming. The disappearances are just the beginning. The shadows are gathering, and I think I know why. There's an eclipse coming next week. Jimmy Red Feather says that's when the shadow people are strongest, when the barrier between their world and ours is thinnest. I've requested backup from other rangers, but will they believe me? Would you believe me if I told you shadows could walk, could think, could hunt? I have to go now. My flashlight is flickering, and the shadows in my office are moving again. But before I do, let me warn you. If you're planning to visit Mount Rainier, don't. And whatever you do, don't take any pictures after dark. You might not like what shows up in them, and if you see your shadow move when you're standing still, run. This morning, I spread all the missing persons reports across my desk. 15 people gone in 3 months. No bodies found, no clues. Just empty campsites and those strange photos. I decided to talk to more tribal elders. Maybe they could help make sense of what's happening. Mary White Cloud, an 80-year-old grandmother with kind eyes, invited me to her home just outside the park. As she poured me tea, her hands shook a little. My grandfather used to tell us stories, she said, stirring honey into her cup, about the shadow walkers. We weren't allowed up on certain parts of the mountain after dark, the places where shadows fall wrong. What do you mean, wrong? I asked. Watch your shadow at sunset today, she said. If it stretches toward the mountain, instead of away from the sun, you're in their territory. I wrote everything down in my notebook, trying to stay professional, but my pen kept skipping on the paper, leaving dark blots that looked like tiny figures. Back at the ranger station, I started digging through old files. Turns out these disappearances weren't new. Every few years, people would vanish, always in groups of 3 or 4, always near the same areas, always when an eclipse was coming. My fellow ranger, Mike Peterson, thought I was crazy. Come on, Alex, he said, tapping my desk. There's got to be a normal explanation. Maybe it's a cult or some weird animal we haven't found yet. That's when our computers went dark, all of them at the same time. Power outage, Mike suggested, but the lights were still on. Only the screens were black. Then we saw our reflections in them. Behind us, shadows moved across the wall. Shadows that shouldn't have been there. Mike saw them too. His coffee mug slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor. What was that? That's what I've been trying to tell you, I whispered. The temperature dropped so fast the windows frosted over. Our breath came out in white puffs. The shadows on the wall grew darker, deeper. They looked like people now, but wrong. Too tall, too thin. Their movements weren't human. Mike grabbed his flashlight and shined it at the wall. The shadows scattered like startled birds, but I swear I heard them laugh. Later that day, I found something in the old files that made my blood run cold. A cave painting, photographed in 1954. It showed dark figures surrounding stick people. Below it, someone had translated the Native American words. They come with the darkness. They take us to the Shadowlands. They hunger. I called Mary White Cloud again. The cave painting, I said. Where is it? She was quiet for a long time. Eagle Peak Trail, she finally answered. But Alex, don't go there. Not now. Not with them watching. How do you know they're watching? Look at your shadow, she said. Did. It was noon. My shadow should have been right under me. Instead, it stretched toward the window, reaching for the mountain. I had to check out that cave. Maybe there were answers there, but I wasn't stupid. I wouldn't go alone. I radioed. "Tom Running Bear, our best trail guide? He knew every inch of these mountains. I'll take you," he said. "But only in daylight. And we bring protection." "What kind of protection works against shadows?" I asked. "The kind my people have used for generations," he replied. "Meet me tomorrow at sunrise. And Alex, don't take any photos. They see through. Cameras. It makes them stronger." As I write this, the sun is setting. The shadows in my office are getting longer, darker. They don't match the objects casting them anymore. And I swear they're moving closer. Tomorrow we search for the cave, but tonight I have to survive the darkness. The whispers are starting again. The ancient words I somehow understand. "We see you, Alex Wilson. We've been waiting for someone like you." My flashlight batteries are new, but the beam is already growing dim. And the shadows are getting hungry. The hike to Eagle Peak started normally enough. Tom Running Bear met me at sunrise, carrying an old leather bag full of what he called protection. Bundles of herbs, small wooden carvings, and a necklace made of strange black stones. "Wear this," he said, handing me the necklace. "Don't take it off, no matter what happens." Mike decided to come too, though I could tell he was still scared after what happened in the office. Can't blame him. I was scared too. The morning was bright and clear, but something felt off. The birds weren't singing. The usual mountain sounds, wind in the trees, small animals rustling in the bushes, were all silent, like the mountain was holding its breath. "They're following us," Tom said quietly as we climbed. He didn't need to point. We all saw them, shadows flicking between trees, always just at the edge of our vision, moving the wrong way, following us even though the sun was straight above us. Halfway up the trail, our radios crackled to life. Through the static, we heard voices. People, calling for help, crying out names. They sounded like the missing hikers. "Don't listen," Tom warned. "They use your ears to get in your head." But Mike was already pulling out his radio, trying to answer the calls. "This is Ranger Peterson. What's your location? Over." The voice that answered wasn't human anymore. It was like 100 whispers speaking at once. "Come find us, Mike. We're in the shadows. Join us." Mike's face went white. He dropped the radio like it burned him. That's when we heard something, heavy, moving through the trees above us. The shadows on the ground started spinning, making us dizzy. Tom grabbed our arms and pulled us into a small cave. "They're getting stronger," he said, pulling out some of his herbs and lighting them. Sweet. Smoke filled the cave. The eclipse is only 3 days away. "What happens during the eclipse?" I asked, though I was afraid I already knew. "The shadow world and our world become the same," he said. "They can take as many as they want." Suddenly, Mike pointed at the cave wall. "Look, the cave paintings were there just like in the old photo. But they weren't faded like they should be. They looked fresh, wet." As we watched, new shapes appeared, drawing themselves. Dark figures surrounding 3 people, us. "They're not just paintings," Tom whispered. "They're windows. The shadow people use them to watch." That's when Mike screamed. His shadow on the wall had stood up, peeling itself away from him. It reached out with hands made of darkness. Tom threw something from his bag. It looked like salt mixed with herbs. The shadow creature hissed and backed away. "Run!" Tom shouted. "Back to the trail!" We ran. The shadows chased us, sliding over rocks and trees like oil. The whispers got louder, speaking that ancient language. But this time I understood more words. The eclipse comes. The door opens. Your world joins ours. Mike tripped. I turned to help him up, but his shadow had caught him. It was pulling him toward the cave wall. He screamed my name, reaching for my hand. I grabbed him. Tom grabbed me. We pulled as hard as we could. The shadow let go suddenly, sending us tumbling. But Mike wasn't the same. His eyes were different. Empty. Black. "We need to get down the mountain," Tom said. "Now." "But Mike, that's not Mike anymore." "Not." Mike smiled at us. His teeth were shadows too. We ran all the way back to the ranger station. Mike followed at a walking pace but somehow kept up with us, like he was everywhere the shadows were. I'm writing this from the emergency shelter now. Tom's herbs are burning, keeping the shadows at bay. But our flashlights are getting dimmer. The sun is setting. And Mike is out there watching through. Free window. Tom says we have to stop them before the eclipse. He knows a ritual, passed down through generations. But we need to go back to that cave to do it. Back to where the shadows are strongest. The whispers are getting louder. They know what we're planning. And they're hungry. So hungry. The emergency shelter didn't stay safe for long. Around midnight, the shadows started seeping through the cracks under the doors. Tom's herbs were running low. Our flashlights barely worked anymore, even with new batteries. Not Mike stood outside every window, just watching. Sometimes he'd press his hand against the glass, and the shadow would stay there even after he moved away. More shadows that looked like him appeared beside him. Soon we were surrounded by dozens of Mikes, all smiling with those terrible dark teeth. "They're getting ready," Tom said, checking his bag of supplies. "The eclipse starts tomorrow at noon. What happens if we don't stop them?" I asked. "They'll take the whole mountain, maybe more. They've been waiting hundreds of years for an eclipse this perfect." That's when our radio crackled. Mary White Cloud's voice came through. "Alex, Tom, they're in the village. They're taking everyone's shadows. You have to hurry." We heard her scream, then static. Tom grabbed my arm. "We have to go back to the cave. Now. In the dark." "That's crazy. They're strongest at night. They're distracted with the village. This might be our only chance to reach the cave before they're ready." He was right. But that didn't make it any less terrifying. We packed what was left of the herbs and his other protective items. I put on extra layers. The temperature always dropped when they were near. Tom drew protective symbols on our faces with something that smelled like ash and pine needles. "Remember," he said as we got ready to leave, "if your shadow completely separates from you, you'll end up like Mike. Stay in the light as much as you can." We opened the door. The Mikes were gone, but we could hear whispers in the dark. They were calling more people to the mountain. Through breaks in the clouds, we saw cars heading up the road toward the peaks. Lots of cars. "They're drawing people in," Tom said, "like moths to a flame." We took the shortest trail up, using the moon for light. Our flashlights were useless. Now anyway. The shadows danced around us, but they seemed more interested in the people heading up the main road. Then we heard the screams from the parking lot below. "Don't look back," Tom said. "We can't help them now." The climb was harder in the dark. Twice I almost fell. The shadows kept playing tricks, making the path look different than it was. They made stairs look like slopes, and slopes look like cliffs. We were almost to the cave when we heard a familiar voice. "Alex, help me." I turned. There was my sister Rachel stumbling up the path behind us. But Rachel lives in Florida. She couldn't be here. "It's not her," Tom warned. "Don't listen." "Alex, please. I came to find you. Something's wrong with my shadow." She sounded so real, so scared. I started to step toward her. Tom grabbed me. "Look at her feet." I looked. Rachel wasn't casting any shadow in the moonlight. Because she was a shadow. The thing pretending to be Rachel screamed in rage, its face melting into darkness. More shadows rose up around it, taking the shapes of people I knew. My parents, my friends, all calling my name. We ran for the cave. The shadow people chased us, changing shapes, trying to trick us. They called out with the voices of the missing hikers crying for help. We finally made it inside, but what we found was worse than anything outside. The cave paintings were alive, moving across the walls. They showed hundreds of people being pulled into the shadow world. And there in the back of the cave was Mike, the real Mike, or what was left of him. He was half merged with the cave wall like a statue made of shadows. His eyes were open but completely black, and he was speaking. In that ancient language, over and over, the door opens. The feast begins. The shadows will walk in daylight. Tom started unpacking his bag, laying out items in a circle. "We have to start the ritual now." The eclipse is coming sooner than we thought. How can you tell? He pointed at Mike. The shadows around him were getting darker, spreading across the cave floor like spilled ink. Because they're not trying to stop us, Tom said. They want us here. We're right where they need us to be. The shadows were closing in. All the exits were blocked. And somewhere in the darkness, I heard Rachel calling my name again. We were trapped. Inside the cave, Tom worked fast, laying out his items in a circle. Candles, stones, herbs, and something that looked like salt. His hands were shaking, but he didn't stop. Whatever happens, he said, stay in the circle with me. The shadows were everywhere now, dripping down the walls like black rain. They took shapes I recognized. Mike, Rachel, the missing hikers. Even my own shape. They moved closer, reaching for us with dark hands. The ritual, I asked. What does it do? It sends them back, Tom said, lighting the candles. But there's a price. There's always a price. A cold wind blew through the cave, though there was no opening for it to come from. The candles flickered but didn't go out. Outside, the sky was getting darker. The eclipse was starting. That's when Mike's body pulled free from the wall. He moved like a puppet, all wrong and jerky. His mouth opened too wide, showing teeth made of pure darkness. You can't stop this, he said, but it wasn't Mike's voice anymore. It was that ancient whisper, like 1,000 voices speaking together. We have waited too long. The door opens. Your world will join ours. Tom started chanting in his native language. The black stones around our circle began to glow with a soft blue light. The shadows hissed and backed away. Alex, Tom said between chants, like, take out your phone. But you said no photos. Trust me. I pulled out my phone. The screen was black but not turned off black. It was like looking into a deep hole. Then faces started appearing in it. All the people the shadows had taken. They were trying to get out. Pointed at the walls, Tom said. The camera sees what we can't. Through my phone screen, I saw the truth. The cave paintings weren't just pictures. They were doors. Hundreds of doors to the shadow world. And they were all opening. The shadows were gathering into one huge shape. In the middle of the cave, it looked like a giant person made of pure darkness, but its edges kept changing, flowing like smoke. You cannot close all the doors, it said in that terrible whisper voice. We are too many, we are too hungry. Maybe not all, Tom said. But this one, the main door, watch us. He grabbed my hand. The stones glowed brighter. The candle flames turned blue. The shadow creature laughed. Your little ritual cannot harm us. The ritual isn't to harm you, Tom said. It's to trap you. He pulled out one last item from his bag, an old camera, the same kind we found with the missing hikers. Cameras don't just show you, he said. They can catch you, hold you, like the cave paintings did for hundreds of years. The shadow creature's laugh stopped. It lunged for us, but the circle of stones held it back. Alex, Tom said, when I say, now, take a picture, not with your phone, with this. He handed me the old camera. But remember the price. Every prison needs a guard. I understood then. Someone had to stay behind, had to keep the shadows trapped in the photos, in the paintings. Now! Tom shouted. I took the picture. The flash was blinding. The shadow creature screamed. It started, getting pulled into the camera like water down a drain. All the other shadows, too, flowing into that one small camera. But Tom was being pulled in with them. He still held my hand, but he was fading, becoming like smoke. Let go, I yelled. I'll take your place. He shook his head. My people have guarded this place for generations. It's my turn now, just promise me. Keep the camera safe. Keep it dark. Never develop the film. Tom, please, go. The eclipse is almost over. If you're still here when the doors close. And behind me, I heard Tom's last words turn into whispers, joining that ancient voice. The cave entrance started to close, the rocks flowing like black water. I made it out just as the eclipse ended. The sun came back. The shadows returned to normal. But I have the camera. Sometimes late at night, I hear whispers coming from it. They beg me to develop the film, to let them out. I won't, but I still watch my shadow, especially at sunset. And if I see it move when I'm standing still, I run.